I've never met Mr. Eminem. I've always admired him, and to have him do something like that was pretty painful as an artist to another artist. He should be ashamed of himself, what he's doing. Stevie said he's bull. There have been many disgusting statements.
Michael Jackson wasn't just the king of pop. He was the most famous man on the planet. Every move he made was watched. Every word was dissected. And while he built his brand on love, unity, and peace, behind the scenes, it was a different story. Because even someone as legendary as Michael had enemies. Artists who rubbed him the wrong way, bands who mocked him, collaborators who crossed the line. Some of the biggest names in music, people you'd never expect, found themselves on the receiving end of Michael's cold silence, or worse, his quiet revenge. And we're not just talking about minor scuffles, we're talking about full-on rivalries, brutal betrayals, and feuds that lasted decades. One band leader impersonated Michael on stage just to humiliate him. Another icon laughed in his face over a song lyric. And then there was the so-called friend who gave him advice, only to be stunned when Michael used it to take everything. In this video, we're breaking down the 6 music acts Michael Jackson had the most tense, uncomfortable, or downright hostile relationships with. From Prince's wild antics and Nirvana's harsh words to the jaw-dropping story of how a Beatle lost control of his own songs. This isn't just about grudges, it's about power, ego, and the dark side of fame. You're about to hear things they never taught you in music documentaries. And trust me, number 1 on this list, it changed the music industry forever. If you're into true stories, untold rivalries, and behind-the-scenes drama from the biggest names in music, hit that subscribe button because we've got more wild stories coming your way. Let's get into it. Number 1, Prince. When people talk about music rivalries, they usually mention Biggie and Tupac, or maybe the Gallagher brothers from Oasis. But in the world of pop superstardom, nothing, and I mean nothing, came close to the silent war between Michael Jackson and Prince. To the public, they were just 2 eccentric geniuses. But behind the scenes, these 2 icons were locked in a cold, calculated battle for artistic dominance. It started in the 1980s, when both artists were dominating the charts. Michael had just dropped Thriller, the biggest-selling album in history, and Prince was riding high off Purple Rain. The media jumped on the chance to compare them. They were both otherworldly, soft-spoken, and shrouded in mystery. But Michael hated comparisons. And Prince? He didn't play second to anyone. The tension exploded over a song. Michael's team wanted to do something historic, a duet between the 2 biggest pop stars in the world. The track was bad. The idea? They'd trade verses, maybe even appear in the music video together. Sounds legendary, right? But Prince shut it down, and not quietly. He reportedly mocked the lyrics right to Michael's face, zeroing in on the line, "Your butt is mine." Prince asked him, "Who's singing that to who? Because you're not saying that to me, and I'm definitely not saying that to you." That wasn't just a rejection, it was a power play. Michael was stunned and pissed. From that moment on, the rivalry wasn't just media speculation, it was real. Michael viewed Prince as cocky and unpredictable. Prince saw Michael as overly polished, controlled, and fake. Their paths crossed often, but the energy was always icy. At one James Brown concert, both were in attendance. Michael got on stage first, doing a brief dance. Prince followed, ripped his shirt off, climbed on top of a speaker, and nearly knocked over a stage light. Some thought he was trying to upstage Michael. Others said he was just being Prince. But either way, it was a direct challenge. And it didn't stop there. Prince once drove up to Michael's house uninvited, just to challenge him to a game of ping pong. When Michael picked up the paddle, Prince slammed the ball so hard it flew past him and hit the wall. Michael didn't even try to return it. He just stood there, stunned. Later, he told a friend, "That man's not playing with a full deck." Still, Michael respected Prince's talent. He just couldn't trust him. He saw him as chaotic, confrontational, and too wrapped up in ego. Behind closed doors, he'd call him strange or difficult. He even once joked he'd put a bass solo on the national anthem if you let him. They never made peace, never collaborated, never even shared a real conversation after that infamous bad meeting. Up next, the band that dismissed Michael as nothing more than a dancer and paid the price for it when he quietly cut them off for good. Number 2, Oasis. Michael Jackson was used to being idolized. Whether it was fans fainting at his concerts or other musicians begging to work with him, he rarely encountered anyone bold or foolish enough to disrespect him publicly. Then came Oasis, the British rock band that exploded in the mid-90s, led by the notoriously arrogant Gallagher brothers Noel and Liam. They weren't just cocky, they were loud, brash, and eager to tear down any artist who didn't meet their narrow idea of real music. And Michael Jackson? He was target number one. In an interview during their peak, Noel Gallagher smirked and said, "Michael Jackson's not even a real singer. He's a dancer, a good dancer. That's all." That wasn't just shade, it was a slap in the face. Michael had built an empire on songwriting, performance, vocal mastery, and this guy reduced it to moonwalking? But it wasn't just a one-off insult. Oasis kept coming. They mocked his high voice. They joked about his image, his surgeries, even his fan base. It was open season. For most artists, this would have caused a media war. But Michael didn't take the bait. He never clapped back in public. He didn't need to. Because Michael played a different kind of game. Quiet, strategic, permanent. When MTV began planning a major tribute event in the early 1900s, Oasis was in the running. But behind the scenes, Michael's team made it clear, as long as Oasis was involved, Michael wouldn't be. Just like that, their invite disappeared. It wasn't a press headline, it wasn't a public feud, it was something worse. It was a silent blacklist. Michael didn't just ignore Oasis, he erased them from opportunities they didn't even know they'd lost. One music executive later said, "You don't mock Michael Jackson in public and expect to be welcomed into his world." What's done even more? The global power balance. Oasis had conquered the UK, but Michael still owned the world. His albums were selling across continents, his concerts breaking records. And while the Gallaghers were busy throwing insults, Michael was buying catalogs, producing world tours, and rewriting pop history. The message was clear. You can mock the throne all you want, but you'll never sit on it. And up next, an even more ideological clash. A group that didn't just mock Michael, they accused him of selling out the very people he claimed to uplift. Number 3, Public Enemy. Michael Jackson believed in the power of music to heal, to unite, to lift people above pain and into something beautiful. But not every artist saw music the same way, and in the late 1980s and early 1990s, a new powerful voice emerged, one that called out injustice, corruption, and sometimes fellow artists. That voice was Public Enemy. Led by Chuck D, Public Enemy didn't just make music, they made war cries. Their lyrics were filled with rage against systemic racism, police brutality, media manipulation. It was raw, it was real, and it was revolutionary. But in their fight to wake up the masses, they also pointed fingers at artists they felt weren't doing enough. And one of those artists was Michael Jackson. Though Chuck D never named him directly in early tracks, the message was loud and clear. In interviews, he called out mainstream pop stars who refused to speak up about Black issues. He criticized their silence, their corporate deals, their comfortable distance from the real-world struggle. And let's be honest, Michael at that time was the face of polished global pop. He was loved by everyone, from suburban kids in Ohio to fans in Tokyo. But that universality made him a target. Chuck D once said, "If you're not speaking on Black pain, you're part of the problem." Michael didn't respond publicly. That wasn't his style. But according to close friends, the criticism hit hard. Because privately, Michael did care about injustice, deeply. He donated millions to charities. He addressed racism in songs like Black or White and They Don't Care About Us. But he believed in leading with unity, not outrage. He told a friend, "I don't want to divide people. I want to heal them." Still, it was clear he didn't support Public Enemy's message or their methods. He once referred to their music as angry noise that scared people away from the message. In Michael's world, love was louder than hate. And in Chuck D's world, love without confrontation was useless. It was more than a musical difference. It was a philosophical divide. And while they never clashed directly, those close to Michael say he felt that Public Enemy had misunderstood him, and worse, misrepresented him. To Michael, being silent didn't mean being blind. It meant being strategic. But to Public Enemy, silence was complicity. And the gap between them, it never closed. Coming up next, a grunge icon who called Michael's music fake and helped start a cultural movement that terrified him.
Number 4. Nirvana. In the early 1990s, music was changing. Fast. Gone were the glossy synths and shiny dance moves of the 80s. In their place came ripped jeans, distortion pedals, and a sound that felt like a punch in the face. It was raw, it was angry, and it had a name: grunge. At the center of it all was Nirvana. Kurt Cobain wasn't trying to be a star, he was trying to destroy everything that made stardom fake. And for him, Michael Jackson represented exactly what he hated about the music industry. Kurt once reportedly called pop music plastic and made no secret of his contempt for artists who, in his eyes, sold style over substance. Though he never released a diss track about Michael, his feelings were obvious in interviews, offhand remarks, and the overall tone of his rebellion. He mocked pop icons with over-the-top stage shows. He criticized radio-friendly hooks. And when asked about mainstream superstars, he often rolled his eyes. Everyone knew who he meant, even if he didn't say it out loud. According to insiders, he once heard "Smells Like Teen Spirit" playing at a rehearsal studio and asked someone, "Is this supposed to be music? Where's the melody?" He wasn't being arrogant, he was genuinely confused. To him, Nirvana's sound felt chaotic, painful, lost. He didn't understand why so many kids were resonating with it. Michael was all about harmony, craft, control. Every beat, every breath, planned to perfection. Nirvana, on the other hand, celebrated imperfection. Cobain screamed off-key on purpose. He recorded songs in one take, rough and unpolished, because it felt more honest that way. And that terrified Michael. Because for the first time in decades, he wasn't the voice of youth anymore. Nirvana was. And what they were saying? It wasn't smooth or hopeful. It was messy, angry, sad. Privately, Michael feared what grunge meant for the next generation. He once told a friend, "Music is supposed to lift people, not drown them." But for Nirvana fans, the music was a lifeline. To some, it was just a cultural shift. To Michael, it felt like the world had turned its back on beauty. And while he never publicly attacked Nirvana, his silence said everything. Coming up next, the band that mocked Michael live on stage, then paid the price when he quietly cut them off for good. Number 5. Guns N' Roses. If there was one thing Michael Jackson couldn't stand, it was public disrespect. He rarely responded to insults, but he never forgot them. And when it came to Guns N' Roses, the disrespect wasn't just behind the scenes, it was right there on stage, in front of thousands. At first, it seemed like Michael and the legendary hard rock band had no reason to clash. They came from different worlds, pop and rock, glitter and leather. But the unexpected bridge between them was Slash, the iconic GNR guitarist. Slash was a massive fan of Michael's work. And Michael? He loved Slash's raw guitar tone. Their collaborations on songs like Black and White and Give In To Me became instant classics. It was the kind of crossover no one expected, but fans loved it. There was just one problem. Axl Rose hated it. He didn't just dislike Michael, he despised the idea of Slash working with him. He saw it as a betrayal. In his mind, Guns N' Roses was about rebellion, grit, danger. Michael was mainstream, safe, commercial. To Axl, Slash playing for Michael was like a priest DJing at a nightclub. And he made his feelings known, loudly. At a Guns N' Roses concert in the early 90s, Axl went off script. In front of a roaring crowd, he launched into a bizarre parody of Michael Jackson's signature moves. He strutted across the stage, grabbing his crotch, spinning in slow motion, and even mimicked Michael's high-pitched hee-hee with a sneer on his face. The crowd laughed, but the footage made its way back to Michael. He didn't sue. He didn't go to the press. That wasn't his style. Instead, he quietly canceled future appearances that would have involved Slash. A music exec later revealed that Michael had planned a follow-up performance with Slash for a major awards show. After Axl's stunt, it vanished. Privately, Michael told his manager, "I don't want anything to do with that energy. It's toxic." What stung even more was the hypocrisy. Axl had once claimed to admire Michael, but the moment Slash stepped outside the rock bubble, he turned it into a personal war. Michael hated that. He didn't just see it as disrespect toward him, he saw it as small-mindedness, an artist being punished for exploring beyond his genre. And for a man who had built his career on breaking boundaries, that was unforgivable. He told a friend, "Great artists collaborate. They don't tear each other down." In the end, Michael and Slash remained friendly, but Guns N' Roses, they never got a second chance. And up next, the most complicated entry on this list, a group Michael deeply admired, a man he once called a friend, and a betrayal that changed both of their legacies forever. Number 6. The Beatles. Michael Jackson never hated the Beatles. In fact, few artists inspired him more. He studied their melodies, their harmonies, the way they revolutionized music. To Michael, the Beatles were sacred, especially Paul McCartney, whom he looked up to like a mentor. But that admiration turned to tension, and what happened between them would spark one of the most controversial music business stories of all time. In the early 1980s, Michael and Paul were close. They collaborated on songs like The Girl Is Mine and Say Say Say, hung out on video sets, and even joked about owning each other's songs someday. Paul, who had built his post-Beatles career with smart business moves, once casually mentioned to Michael the value of owning publishing rights. It was a friendly tip, or at least it seemed like one. But in 1985, Michael shocked the world and Paul by doing something unthinkable. He bought the ATV music catalog for $47.5 million. That catalog included over 250 Beatles songs. Suddenly, Paul McCartney no longer had control over the music he'd written with John Lennon, and the new owner? His former friend. Paul was furious. He reached out to Michael, sent letters, made personal calls asking to buy back the rights. He expected a deal, or at least a gesture of goodwill. But Michael didn't budge. His response was simple: "It's just business." Publicly, Michael said he had tremendous respect for the Beatles, but privately, things got cold. Paul began airing his frustrations in interviews, accusing Michael of betrayal. Their friendship collapsed. They never collaborated again. They never even reconciled. To outsiders, it looked like a money grab, but those close to Michael tell a different story. They say he felt used, that once he owned the catalog, Paul saw him not as a friend, but as an obstacle. Michael reportedly told someone in his inner circle, "They didn't care when I was young and broke. Now I'm a threat because I own something they want." Some even claim he felt racially slighted, that people weren't ready for a black man to own one of the greatest catalogs in rock history. Whether or not that's true, the damage was done. Michael held on to those rights for the rest of his life. Years later, he even merged the catalog with Sony, expanding its reach and doubling its value. Meanwhile, Paul spent decades trying to reclaim the control of the songs he once wrote. But here's what's important. Michael didn't hate the Beatles, he didn't even hate Paul. What he hated was the way friendship disappeared the moment money got involved. And in the end, this wasn't just about music publishing. It was about legacy, power, and the price of trust in an industry where nothing stays sacred for long. Even a global icon like Michael Jackson had his limits. Behind the polished smile and perfect performances was an artist who remembered every insult, every slight, and every betrayal. These 6 acts didn't just cross paths with him, they crossed a line. If you found this story wild, it's just the beginning. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss more untold stories from music's biggest legends.